What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are reacting to AniNews, Subaru's new Power ReZero cut content for season 3 episode 3. Came out 4 hours ago. Let's get right into it.
With so much happening in such a short amount of time, it's easy to overlook things like Subaru's new power. It's not often he gets new tools added to his arsenal, but with the addition of Beatrice, he's actually developed 3.
OP Spirit.
That's 3 one-of-a-kind abilities completely unique to him, one of which we actually got to see in action against Regulus. This was just a small part in an otherwise grand encounter, so in addition to all the craziness that happened here, I'll also go over the more detailed past involving Garfield and his mother. Everything this intense and emotional episode of ReZero left out from the light novels.
They set a ton of death flags for one of these two. I think I've seen Garfield in promo art, so I think he's safe. Amy though, I don't know, she might be fucked. Might be fucked.
Episode 53, Gorgeous Tiger.
Gorgeous Tiger.
Covering chapters 2 to 4 from volume 17 of the light novel. Last week I had stopped midway through the Amelia and Sirius fight, so to start there, a whole conversation was cut. Before closing out the fight in a blazing flame of rage, Sirius first made clear what she deemed as love. To her, it was the ideal of many becoming one. The bonds forged by shared feelings allowing everyone to experience another's joy and sadness. This was something Sirius knew Amelia could never obtain herself, but out of innate curiosity.
Wait.
This was something Sirius knew Amelia could never obtain her.
That is insane shade. What? Wait.
1. The bonds forged by shared feelings allowing everyone to experience another's joy and
okay, why can't Subaru give that to Amelia?
This was something
That's
Sirius
insane.
knew Amelia could never obtain herself, but out of innate curiosity to understand it anyway, Amelia still went on to question it. She was truly intrigued enough.
She's like, hey, my Subaru is like in love with me. What do you know?
To confidently ask, what love? This only stirred Sirius's anger more and
Giving the shade
sent her
back.
deeper into another spiral of threats and
She's in love with a dead person, and she's talking about what she... Yeah, good shit, Amelia.
insults. It had led to the charge that we saw in the anime, and the overall outcome where Regulus would have to save her. If you're wondering why Subaru couldn't do anything to save her himself, it's because Sirius's authority.
He's also weak as fuck. Beatrice, maybe. Baby Beatrice could have done something. Subaru? Whip.
Had taken effect on him. The fear Tina had being Sirius's captive quickly spread in an infinite loop between him, Luzbel, and Beatrice.
Oh, Beatrice too, wow. I don't know why I assumed she would have been immune, but... So, if it ever looks like Sirius is about to lose, she whips out Tina so that way everyone can get re-fearified. Okay.
All 3 trembled as fear became their entire existence. This paved the path for Regulus to step in and...
So does that mean Regulus is immune to her authority? Interesting. And if he is immune, why? Is he just stronger? Or does his authority is like, you know, Accelerator, whatever the fuck he can do to nullify everything? Does that extend to authorities as well? You can just nullify any, like, what?
Instead, leading to an even longer rant about respect. You see, in addition to defining the basics of common courtesy, Regulus also suggested that perhaps Subaru denied his rights on purpose. That, or maybe Subaru was just unintelligent.
Unintelligent.
Either way, the argument Regulus made was supported by the same superficial logic as Sirius's. What I mean is that, sure, their remarks may sound reasonable when they're speaking, but that forced rationality was always underpinned by these insane statements nestled within. It was obscenity hidden behind a facade of normalcy. Regulus then went on to directly contest Sirius's idea of love, since her clinging to a dead man was fundamentally flawed.
Regulus, the guy who goes, she's pretty, what else do I need? Is patronizing her about love? Hey, but I mentioned the dead thing, yeah.
Reason being that, for him, if the person he loved died, then it only made sense to proactively search for another.
That makes more sense than Sirius.
Regulus believed to be a law of the world, the extent of nature as he knew it. To disobey that made Sirius no different than garbage, and that was a notion that didn't sit too well with her. So, as she swung her chains out of pure unrelenting anger, the ones that looked as if they had made direct impact did nothing as they bounced right off of him. It was as if they were reflecting right off the side of his face. This made it clear that Regulus had the advantage, which made Subaru worried that he might
Subaru's
just
like,
kill
"Oh shit."
Sirius. It would mean the end for him and everyone else in the square.
That would have been good,
Luckily, he
honestly.
didn't, but the fear of facing down two arch
Why is Subaru against dying so much now? I get it, he has self-love, but like, he's against dying because he doesn't want to waste his life. He wants himself to make it. But there's no way someone close to him being taken from his life would be okay. He would not be okay with that. He is just risking a checkpoint getting saved. And I wouldn't do that, but whatever. What do I know?
was starting to get overwhelming. If not for Beatrice supporting him every step of the way, then Subaru knew that he wouldn't
Beatrice.
have been able to do anything. So it's because she was there and lending him her power
That's a
that
great frame.
Subaru felt he could stand and actually do something. It was enough motivation to produce a somewhat decent attack on Regulus. Subaru knew that he wouldn't be able to hurt Regulus, but by at least binding him, he thought perhaps he could hinder his movements. Shamok was then supposed
landed,
to nullify
though.
his senses, but just as we saw, it didn't have any effect whatsoever. It had forced Subaru to use his new special ability, EMM, the first of 3 spells jointly developed by him and Beatrice, and the only of its kind to exist in the entire world. As an original spell activated through the transfer of mana from Subaru to Beatrice, Subaru would send mana directly from his broken gate, then in
Does that mean that Beatrice can't even use it unless she has Subaru? It sounds like.
return, an invisible magic field would cover his entire body. The result
That'd be really convenient to use on Amelia, by the way.
was an absolute defense which physically cut him from the world itself. It prevented anything from interacting with Subaru whatsoever. So, regardless of whether it was a person or thing, any being covered by this invisible field of magic would find themselves removed from the physical plane, albeit temporarily. It's what allowed Subaru to dodge Regulus the way that he did. Whereas death was what awaited him had Regulus made contact with him, what happened
I feel like that scene has more foreshadowing than we know.
whereas
How does
death
this
was
carriage
what
explode?
awaited him had
Okay, so it's a carriage.
Regulus made
There's blur, some slices,
contact
and it fucking explodes. And Regulus is in the middle. Where did? Oh shit! I just scrolled way too far.
damage or any other sign of. It was as if different when Subaru's and whereas Zingli did.
I think it's 54.
Since he landed as
Shit.
the way that he did. Whereas death was what awaited him had Regulus
So Regulus is not on the screen. Oh, there he is.
made.
So upon making contact, stuff happens. Everything explodes. It's like he can control subatomic combustion or something. If there is a particle near him, he goes, nuh-uh. Uh-uh. Do that to enough things and things go boom.
With him, what happened instead was Subaru completely bypassing him. That was the effect of EMM. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long though, as
I had Subaru snap out of soul washing. If he was so scared, everyone else is like zombified walking towards him.
in its current state, one hit was the most that it could cover him for. That said, it was just enough time for Subaru to land a hit himself. An initial physical punch that was nullified completely, then a secondary invisible punch that had actually landed. The first physical punch had provided some pretty useful information, since while Subaru knew that he felt his fist make contact, the lack of damage or any other sign of literally anything happening made it clear Regulus had damage nullification of his own. It was as if he existed within his own permanent EMM state. The outcome was vastly different when Subaru's Invisible Providence landed, since the force from that had actually gone to stagger Regulus. Whereas every other attack did absolutely nothing, this one half-baked
So I wonder if authorities like counter each other, you know? Regulus isn't affected by soul washing. Sloth goes through his authority because when Betelgeuse was fighting Regulus, he couldn't do anything to stop his hands. He was getting thrown around and everything. So, and I think it has something to do with Regulus, like, um, acknowledging the attack. Regulus gets caught off guard a lot, and that's when he gets attacked. He doesn't do anything, but he still gets attacked. So, I wonder if only other authorities can harm Regulus, or whatever the source of his shield is. You get rid of that, and then you can harm him. But like,
authorities surprisingly did. Now, I know the anime made it seem like Regulus tanked it just like all the others, but by having it directly contrast with the physical punch made immediately before, it makes it clear that this was different. Somehow Subaru had managed to bypass Regulus's defenses. His attack didn't just bounce off like how all the others did. Subaru didn't have time to realize this in the moment though, since
I'm also surprised they're not really acknowledging that it, and maybe they don't know that it's Sloth. Like, Sirius just goes, oh my god, Betelgeuse, hello. But they didn't really acknowledge that, hey, that's our witch factor, can we get that back? They're just kind of okay with Subaru running around with it. They really, I mean, they had a schedule to follow, I guess.
his primary focus was saving Amelia. Because Invisible Providence came at the cost of his very soul though, the result of using it began to torment his insides. You see, as a forbidden art that exceeded Subaru's body's capacity, Invisible Providence corrupted his soul every time he used it. It left his body reeling in pain and deteriorated the one thing that should never be touched. This was the price of using an authority that was incomplete, and it often left Subaru looking like this. All
Wonder
of
how
this
you make it
wasn't
complete.
as useless as you might think it was, though, since
'Cause
this
he is
little
compatible with
skirmish
it.
revealed crucial information about
Isn't proficient with it.
It had showed Subaru that Greed's movements were sluggish. If he had to classify it in terms of levels, Regulus's skills for combat were just above that of a novice. Like, Subaru himself believed that even he was more competent. To him, Regulus's style of fighting seemed amateur through and through. This provided hope to an otherwise bleak situation, since lethal attacks didn't mean anything if they didn't connect. It was a potential weakness Subaru thought maybe he could capitalize on. With their fight now pretty much done though, Regulus would go on to speak about why he wanted Amelia. Apparently he didn't uphold his vow last time, so in accordance with his ideal of seeking out a new partner, Regulus resolved to do so this time. He wasn't gonna yield when it came to living the tranquil life he thought he deserved. He would protect and cherish Amelia in his own twisted way, and he would do so just because it was his right to. Everything was also he could maintain his own small slice of happiness.
But he follows the gospel to a T. What if the gospel said, no more rights for you? Would he accept that? I wonder.
If it meant protecting that, then Regulus had no problem exploiting the powers he'd been granted. So, once again, Subaru was confronted with more twisted logic, but what terrified him more was the conviction with which Regulus spoke it with. For the first time, Subaru felt genuine fear from Regulus. It was as if the words he spoke were how he truly felt. This led Subaru to deny Regulus vehemently, stating how Amelia was his bride instead. It wasn't waifu like how the anime translated it, but instead bride, which is a lot more fitting given the context.
Oh, Crunchyroll.
It was in the meantime that
Dang it, those
Beatrice was
subs.
charging up, getting ready to use the third of their original spells. They still didn't
was the
know
second?
how Regulus's damage nullification worked, but whatever this next attack was, it was apparently very much worth trying. It was right before Subaru could unleash it, though, that Sirius would intervene and stop him, revealing her passionate interest in who Subaru was now. Before, she'd only ever been looking at Amelia and Beatrice, but now she was staring directly at him. So, to Subaru, the potential of Romane Conti being this prominent family in the witch cult was always just a joke that he'd only entertain in passing. To find out it was actually a legitimate husband and wife team, well, that was way beyond anything he'd ever expected. It made Sirius's hatred towards Amelia all the more confusing, since her ties to Satella should have made her an object of worship. Her desires directly conflicted with what Betelgeuse wanted. Everything
Did
came
they?
to an end once the noon bell rang, which
Sirius hates Amelia because her husband was obsessed with Amelia. Valid to me.
surprisingly enough, Sirius actually acknowledged. Though she clearly wasn't satisfied with the outcome, whatever was compelling her to move on, It was much more important than her
Compelling.
reunion with her beloved. She did, however, exit on one final affirmation, once again proclaiming her ideology, except this time mixing parts of Betelgeuse's. Specifically the notion that pain makes you savor life, and life exists so that one can prove their love. So, if love to her is the wish to become one, then this joining of pain was a true expression of it. It was a statement that went.
Also, they're not really married, are they? Like, the, Sirius is like, we exchanged eye glances daily. Okay. That's not that often. Like, come on now. Something about, like, inhaling his breath. Eating his food. Now, that's pretty romantic, but I don't think they're actually married. Because I'm pretty sure Regulus is something like, oh, you took his last name. Blah, 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 like, as if, like, he wasn't around. Like, he died. And then she took his name. I don't think they're actually married.
To challenge Beatrice's own idea of love. She, however, retorted with her own example, basically saying how her and Subaru became one long ago, yet by not becoming anything like Sirius, it was enough to deny everything she stood for. She had essentially stood her ground and rejected the Archbishop in front of her. Beatrice didn't remain focused on that for long though, as healing was the main priority now. Unfortunately, Wrath's authority didn't share that healing, so if Beatrice wanted to save everyone, then she would have to do so.
I wonder because she canceled it, right? That's the only reason that it would make sense, that she turned off her authority. Because it's a soul sharing, it's not pain only. Yeah. She definitely just turned it off and left, which is inconvenient.
Wakes up.
Also super convenient if they get that power. Imagine they defeat Sirius and they give, like, I don't know, Amelia the Wrath Witch Factor. Everyone's injured, they heal one person, everyone gets healed. That'd be so convenient.
And aside from retelling the situation to Al and Felix, the only thing worth mentioning is the special condition binding Subaru and Beatrice. As a special type of spirit, Beatrice couldn't accept mana from anyone other than Subaru. It's a condition that's effectively sidelined her since Subaru simply can't supply sufficient amounts of mana. It's the main burden Beatrice constantly has to deal with. This made Subaru's options very limited and provided even fewer ways to navigate this. If we were to look on the bright side though, I guess the only bit of good news was that Beatrice's condition wasn't gonna worsen. She just needed help waking up, something no one present could do right now. Krush would then arrive to discuss what happened, meeting Subaru in the field hospital since to ask Subaru to come to her would be inappropriate. It's the stage for the meeting that we saw in the anime, which is actually the point where the episode ends. The stuff with Garfield happens all the way after, essentially serving as a bit of a flashback. So, to switch gears to that, the best place to start is at the house. It was at this point that Garfield was still uncertain whether this was actually his mother or not. The last time he'd seen her was when he was just a baby, and the only reason he was even able to recognize her now was simply due to his vivid trial back in Sanctuary. That made it clear that his mother died searching for their father, so as far as Garf knew, the reunion he truly desired was nothing more than a distant fantasy. To him, this Liara Thompson could not be Alicia Tinzel. She was just someone coincidentally identical.
Wait, what was Tiara? Liara.
That's what Garfield wanted to think.
So they
but
changed the names. That's so
Alicia's
weird. Don't do
behavior
that.
indicated otherwise. It was then that Garfield would remember Alicia's past, recounting every tragedy as it happened to her. So it all started with her family's debt, leading her to be sold to slave traders while still a child. Those slave traders were then raided by demi-human bandits, and Alicia would then become a slave to them instead. They would eventually abandon her after she became pregnant with Frederica, leaving her to be picked up by yet another group of bandits. It was then that she would give birth to Frederica, and that was a time that neither really spoke about. All Garfield knew after was that as soon as Alicia became pregnant with him, that's when both her and Frederica fled to safety. It was the move which would result in her inevitable home at Sanctuary. So, this was the misfortune that was Alicia's life, at least up until she was adopted by Roswell. To him, she was described as both mysterious and incomprehensible, a person who always kept her happiness close. The reason why was never made clear, but Roswell imagined it was the motivation keeping her going. These were the words Roswell shared one night when him, Garf, and Otto were drinking. Garfield's own impressions were a little bit different though, since for his mother to leave a peaceful place like
Who got adopted?
why was sensible by Roswell. It was the move which would result in her inevitable then that she would give birth to Frederica, and that was a time that neither really spoke about. All Garfield knew after was that as soon as Licia became pregnant with him, that's when both her and Frederica fled to safety. It was the move which would result in her inevitable home at Sanctuary. So, this was the misfortune that was Licia's life, at least up until she was adopted by Roswell. To him, she was described as both mysterious and incomprehensible, a person who always kept her happiness close. The reason why was never made clear, but Roswell imagined it was the motivation keeping her going. These were the words Roswell shared.
Adopted by Roswell. Why? What? Okay, we are definitely getting some backstory on why she was leaving the sanctuary. Because if she got attacked by some bandits, then she does not care about the baby daddy. Okay? That was her excuse for leaving the sanctuary. To tell Garf is that was why she left, apparently. I don't think she cares about the baby daddy, so she left for a different reason. Let's figure out what that reason was.
One night when him, Garf, and Otto were drinking. Garfield's own impressions were a little bit different though, since for his mother to leave a peaceful place like Sanctuary.
Imagine Roswell caused that landslide. Holy shit. He's 5 steps ahead. Yeah.
Well, that just didn't make any sense.
No way.
To him.
I'm still on like Gluttony ate her memories. I mean, okay, so Roswell goes, I'll show her for the water. I don't know if I can add it. I don't know. Anyways. Causes mudslide, landslide, boom, boom. She's out cold. Roswell goes, yep, alright. I can now Stockholm Syndrome, I can groom up this Garfield, we'll be good to go. Gluttony's like, so Lie Batson Kaitos is, I think, 14 or 13. Garfield's 15. So in order for that to have happened, I think Garfield was like very young, very young. So we're just gonna say that Lie wasn't even born yet. However, there are multiple gluttons around. I don't know their ages. I know there's at least a younger sibling. I don't know if there's an older sibling. I wonder if the previous gluttony owner, if that would like copy or not. Also, don't give your name to gluttony. Everyone, Rem went, hey, I'm Rem. Nice, let's do battle. Who's Rem? Krush. Let's fucking fight. No name stolen. Let's just say Alicia here. She's out cold. She's not giving her name. She's still walking. I think it was gluttony. I don't know. It probably wasn't Lie, but it was some glutton. We'll see.
It made her.
It'd be really funny if it was gluttony and she got her memories back. And she's like, I need to go to my kids. And then I don't forget what his name was. The guard is like, you have kids? What the fuck is wrong?
Her seemed like somewhat of an airhead, especially since it was the decision which he thought led to their death. In the end, Garfield still didn't know what his mother was thinking back then, and more importantly, the source of her happiness still remained a mystery. They were burning questions
It was
he
you.
hoped at least one day he might be able to find an answer to. In any case, with Fred's sister constantly urging Garfield out, he didn't feel welcome until Fred himself said something. The way he came up and grabbed onto his sleeve froze Garfield and filled his head with regret. It made him question why he had even come here to begin with. The nail in the coffin was seeing the mutual love between Liara and her husband, which to Garfield was affection both unmistakable and unbearable. Perhaps it made him feel like he was being robbed of something that was rightfully his. Whatever it was stirring his emotions, the need to run away was so overwhelming that he didn't even realize he was dragging Mimi while doing so. His grip on her wrist was so incredibly tight that when he'd finally stopped, her arm had actually turned blue from it. It was then that Gaelic would arrive to ask Garf his question,
what?
which would in turn
That is
reveal a
not the
truth that
name I
Garfield
remember.
had never even considered before. You see, he'd always thought his mother was dead because she'd never returned, so the thought of anything else didn't really occur to him. Knowing now that he was so very wrong to make that assumption, well, that was a harsh truth that really dug into him. Now, it was prior to saying he wasn't related to Liara that there was a swirling torrent of emotion bubbling within him, making him feel sick. As soon as he said what he needed to say though, all he felt after was loss and emptiness. The reason why he decided not to say anything was because doing so would only cause more harm than good. It wouldn't change the fact 15 years were spent with a different family, and it wouldn't change the fact that 15 years were lost as Licia. The only thing it would do is burden her with the guilt of knowing she left behind something precious. So, to put that burden not only on Liara but also her family too, well, Garf knew that that wouldn't be fair. His self-satisfaction didn't take priority over any of that. Sure, he alone would be the one to gain closure, but everyone else would go on to suffer. It was a burden he couldn't share, not even with Frederica or Ryuzu. So, in order to protect everyone else, Garfield knew the best thing to do was just abandon his own desires and do his best to keep everything to himself.
It's a good panel.
That's really what he wanted to do, but yet again the inner conflict within him was tearing him apart. As much as he wanted to keep all of it inside, Garfield just couldn't find the strength to follow through with it. It was a constant back and forth of him wanting to be the tiger he always thought he was and the true emotion he couldn't keep contained anymore. In the end, his inner thoughts had turned into some pretty deep poetry. That's where I'm gonna end today's episode, so if you liked what you saw and want to see more, then be—
Alright, what did we learn? AniNews video, by the way. What did we learn? Not much. Regulus has a weakness, but we don't know what that it exists, but we don't know where it is. Is it other authorities? Maybe. He doesn't take damage, but he can be caught off guard. Sirius is a wild card. She can die, but she has to have her authority off, or else everyone fucking dies. Garfield is having his own struggles. I mean, yeah. Great AniNews video. Phenomenal. Alright, well, same time next week. See you guys then. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in.